Welcome to Church Around the Corner, the continued conversation. We're calling this particular time House Church 101 because we thought it'd be important just to spell out in practical terms how we see what this shared life experience that we're calling House Church looks like. So let me ask you the W5, the who, what, where, why, when.
Right. Yeah. Good.
So Mark, you've been in a house church for about 12 years. Who is in a house church?
Yeah, who is in a house church? Now, just before that, can I just say, if you're watching this and you're considering being part of Church Around the Corner, and you're going to leave an existing group or a church, right? That you leave well. Let the people know you're leaving and maybe why you're leaving, what you're leaving to. And I often say it's important to end well, right? Sometimes it can be as simple as just saying an email. Here's what we're up to, and I know you've done that with some of the people you know, right? Mm-hmm. And what I'm going to do is just put a link to an example letter or an email that people could send. Anyway, back to your question. Who's in the house church? Well, anybody, single, married, young, old, families, up to a maximum. Yeah. I know we've talked about 20, but say 15 or so. And so anybody and family groupings. But there are two key who people. There's the leader. That's the one who's leading the house church time. That's one. And the other key who person is the host. That's the person or family hosting the gathering, right? The host usually gets people to bring things for a simple shared meal, right? Simple, we're not talking about an elaborate meal, just like soup and salad. You just organize who's bringing what. And they don't do all the cooking. Anyway, and ideally, once it gets established, the leader and the host will rotate, right? You'll move through where people live. But anyway, that's who comes to that. That's your first.
All right. Okay. Who?
Yeah.
Where?
Wherever the host is hosting it. I mean, basically any place where you can meet all together relatively comfortably, right? I mean, you can be packed in, but if the 15 of you, can you fit into a space, home, an apartment, a pub, condos, often they have common areas that you can use. And ideally, you move around. You don't just always meet in one place. If you live in roughly the same area, you can move around. And I think it's really important to emphasize again that you're not in the business here of entertaining people or throwing a party. The place doesn't have to be all spick and span and neat and tidy, right?
Yeah. Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, so when?
We're suggesting twice a month, ideally, never on a Sunday, so as to preserve our value of just keeping that space open, Sunday free from churchy stuff on it. But basically, the people are going to have to figure out when it works. So twice a month. And as we mentioned before, when you meet, you're going to meet you can budget on close to 3 hours. Remember we did that time, how much time it takes. Because you are going to be sharing a simple meal and just hanging out together. So
okay. So twice a month and one time in the big.
Once in the big, but we're not talking about that here.
Okay. Yeah. And so why?
Well, in a sense, we've already answered this in many ways, but I think because we have said that this is one of the simplest, easy ways to cultivate what we're calling a shared life experience, right? Okay. Meet in the small, as E.F. Schumacher said, is beautiful, right?
Yeah. What exactly happens?
Yeah, okay. This is good. But actually, I think the more we can think of it as being simple, first off, if you like to sing and you have people who can lead, or maybe you like to sing along with stuff and do some singing, have a worship time, and the sky's the limit here, depending on your abilities and interests, right? Whatever you do, make it age appropriate for the people. So that's first of all, you'll do something like that. In our house church, sometimes we do that, sometimes we don't. It just depends who's leading. Second thing you do is you'll have some interactive learning time together.
Interactive, that sounds like elementary school.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you mean by interactive?
Well, I think the opportunity in its basic sense to interact, to ask questions, and many options here, right? So we've mentioned about being available, being curated teaching or preaching being made available. People watch on their own. You listen to the video, you watch the video or listen to the audio. But you'd have a chance when you got together to ask questions about it, work it out, what it meant together. The leader might have some questions. If you were doing more of a Bible study kind of things, you would split into groups, right? and they could take a chunk of questions and just report back on what they had learned and have some interaction that way. I mean, you can have people, you can have people write a little play, right? So, to illustrate something, or do a dramatic reading, or even do a craft together. We had a lot of fun when we had a whole range of kids around, because you target it to be age appropriate, and you can. But as long as there's some kind of interaction, it's just not a one-way delivery,
All right.
Right?
So like a creative Bible study group, but with something that works for all ages.
Right.
Okay. And I can see the leader leading these segments or giving them shape. So that's their role. But what makes it different from just another group?
Well, I think it sounds very simple, but I think some of the most important stuff you do is being together and basically eating together. There's nothing really like sitting down together and having a simple meal together. And the more you can gather around all together like one extended family, the better it is. And this is the major part that the host makes happen.
Right.
We create the space, but they engineer it so you can have a meal together.
Right. Great. Anything else in terms of the what?
The what we do. Okay, we also have communion every time we meet. So, every 2 weeks we'll have communion. It's very simple in our house church. We just pass around a plate of bread and juice, and each person says to the other, words to this effect: the body and blood of Jesus given for you.
Okay, great.
We do that.
Now, what if someone comes who's not comfortable with that part of it?
I think that's totally fine. They're free to pass, right? We make it a very simple act. We want to make it, because I think often we easily forget that when Jesus gave instructions, when they had the original, sort of, he said, "This do in remembrance of me," it was in the context of a meal, right? They were just having a meal, and he took the bread, and we don't want to complicate things about having communion together. And the final thing we do is talk about our lives and actually spend a little time praying for one another. And that's it.
Great. Okay. So to meet, sing and worship, participate in interactive learning,
Yeah.
Eat together, communion, and praying for one another.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound that complicated.
No, it isn't. I don't want to make it complicated.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's House Church 101. You've passed the course.
Yeah.
Continue to check us out, churcharoundthecorner.blogspot.ca.
Good.
And until next time, thank you.
Okay.